Right now, honored to have Congressman Rodney Davis from the 13th District over in the great state of Illinois with us. Congressman, how are you?
Hey, it's great to be on.
Hey.
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you for your flexibility and your willingness to give us a few minutes today.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So at the top of my show here today at noon, the story broke that the Freedom Caucus has come out and announced that they're in support of this latest version of health care. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I read that you were a member of that Tuesday morning group, which had some issues with some of the Freedom Caucus demands. Can you give us an idea where things stand from your point of view on this?
Well, I'm glad that we've seen more Republicans come together. Look, I've always been supportive of the president's plan. I was supportive of the initial plan. And I think we've worked well. Cross-section of us, those of us who may be part of different groups, have sat down in a smaller group and worked out some changes. I'm supportive of the changes. I think they're better to help lower costs and provide access to care for every single American. You're going to hear a lot of talk that's not true about taking away pre-existing condition coverage. That is not true. You're going to hear a lot of talk about taking away the ability to cap to give the ability to insurance companies to cap lifetime costs. That is not true. What we're doing is we're saying that we've got a better plan that's going to work, be cheaper for many Americans than what they're paying now, and provide them the access and coverage they can use.
So I assume then that there is a version of this floating around that everyone's been able to look at so far. Is that correct?
Well, the version of the bill is the original American Health Care Act. And what would happen is there are going to be some slight amendments. We announced an agreed-to proposal put together involving invisible high-risk pools that are working well in a state like Maine that allows those with pre-existing conditions to pay the exact same as everyone else and gets them a cheaper alternative that's going to allow them to have coverage. Remember, Mark, that we have in this country today, under the 29 million Americans that do not have health insurance now, even though the law says they have to have it. We have 31 million more Americans, many in this individual marketplace, that can't afford to use the coverage they have. That's 60 million people, 20% of our population. That, to me, is not a success when you're talking about healthcare delivery.
Well, let me ask you a couple of specifics here, if you've had a chance to look at this thing. My understanding from reading the reports on this so far is the Freedom Caucus was happy that states are going to have the ability to opt out of a couple of the requirements that are still in effect from Obamacare. I would imagine these are some of the benefits that have to be included in every health care plan. Is that your understanding?
Well, the essential health benefits are portions of the plans that were required by the federal government, but many states, like Illinois, actually require more. What they're talking about is in this, the federal mandate for essential health benefits will still remain. There is a waiver process that states can go to and to ask the Department of Health and Human Services for a waiver, but here's the catch. They've got to still cover those with pre-existing conditions. But if they think they can do it better, if they think they can still meet some of the needs of the essential health benefits by doing it a different way, they have to prove that it's going to be more accessible, cover more people in their state, and also be cheaper, and a cheaper alternative for their residents. And remember, states ought to be able to do what they think is going to provide more coverage, more accessibility, even under a regime, a regulatory regime that is regulated state by state.
Okay.
So we're saying if they want to make it better, sure, make it better, but you've got to cover pre-X. You've got to do these things, and you've got to prove to us why you want that change.
We're talking to Congressman Rodney Davis, who's had a chance to look at some of these changes that have been proposed for the American Health Care Act. So just to make sure I'm clear on this, these essential benefits, as I understand them in discussing this in the past, I felt that they were some of the reasons that healthcare premiums had gone up so much, that to force every single person, a 60-year-old man to pay for coverage for prenatal care and some of these other things were one of the reasons that caused healthcare premiums to go up. If that stuff's still in here, what does this bill do to reduce premiums?
Well, we reduce premiums by actually implementing invisible high-risk pools. We're reducing premiums, too, by allowing more competition. remember, more access to HSAs, more access to consumer-driven insurance type changes that we need, because under the existing system, there is no competition, Mark. A third of the country has one insurance company to choose from. We are going to implement this phase one that has to be done under the Senate rules to have this 51-vote majority. It's inside baseball, I know, but we have to follow those rules. And as we move through our three-phase plan, the second phase, utilizing the regulatory regime that has been set in place by the previous administration to use Secretary Tom Price's ability to insert more competitiveness. And at the same time, our third phase is to do things like allowing associations to band together nationwide.
Okay.
Those will lead to even more options, more competition, and in the end, more affordable choices for every American that will cover the things that we demand in a healthcare delivery system.
Politico is reporting that there's a provision in this proposal that appears to exempt members of Congress and their aides. Can you comment on that?
I have no idea what they're talking about.
Okay. Well, maybe Democrats are the ones that pointed it out to Politico, because they were arguing that they were claiming Republicans are trying to shield themselves from their own legislation. But I just wondered if you knew anything about that since it was brought up. Let me move on very quickly. Do you think we could see a vote on this next week?
I sure hope so. This is something that, I've talked with many of my colleagues over the last 2 weeks when we've been at home in our districts. I was working in a small group with Vice President Pence, and, I've sat down and talked directly to the president about the need to fix the healthcare delivery system we have. And I want to remind people, those who say that the existing system is working, then they are part and parcel to ensuring that we've got 60 million Americans that don't have insurance now or can't afford to use the insurance they have. They are saying that's okay. And I think our plan will address those concerns, address those families, and provide more affordable options. And that's why I hope it's done next week.
Congressman Rodney Davis, do you think it's going to get the same mistreatment by the budget score as the original plan did? Because I felt like they didn't look at the three parts. They looked at the first part and didn't score it fairly.
Well, they can't, because they're limited on what they can use as a formula. I mean, they're mathematicians.
Okay.
Actually, sometimes I think they're terrible dart players, where they just throw it at a dartboard and have an amount. Remember, something as simple as projecting how many people would sign up for Obamacare was off by 50%.
Sure.
From their initial projection. And when we wrote the Farm Bill, something as simple as a Farm Bill, we projected to save $23 billion in mandatory spending. In 3 years, they were proven wrong. We've actually saved $104 billion because we changed words on pieces of paper and enacted good policies. So they're not infallible, but we have to enact good policies, and we believe we put those policies in place that will prove them wrong once again.
What about tax reform today? I listened to the part of the news conference. I played some of the bites on what the president's hoping to do. I think it's an outstanding plan. I don't know how much of it is shooting for the stars and hoping you can get part of it, but getting rid of the AMT and reducing down to three categories of tax, 10, 25, and 35, reducing the corporate tax rate. What's your take on it?
No, we need tax reform. All of us Republicans have campaigned on making the tax code fairer, flatter, and simpler. And this is the president's proposal. Some of those ideas mirror what Chairman Kevin Brady is proposing to come out of the House. So it'll be a great debate. But I want to remind your listeners, if you thought health care reform was tough, tax reform is going to be much tougher. Every single word that exists in the tax code is being used by someone, and it will become a huge debate over what should stay, what shouldn't stay. And I would just urge everyone, look at the totality of the changes that are being offered and figure out how it's going to work in total, because we got to reform our tax code. And I just don't want to see it blown up by all sides. Lots
of oxes to be gored out there, right?
Absolutely.
That's true. Everybody's got to. Well, don't take away that deduction. Let's keep that one. Yeah, I know what you mean. Listen, Congressman, I really appreciate it. I know you got a busy day, and thanks for giving us some enlightenment on this health care bill.
Hey, I appreciate it. One last fact on tax reform.
Yes.
75% of all Americans do not itemize right now.
Really?
And the goal, 75%. So every itemization, every deduction only goes to 25% of all Americans in the individual tax brackets.
Interesting. All right. I did not know that. Very good. Congressman, thank you.
Take care.
Yep, you have a great day. Thanks for your time. Appreciate that. All right. So I would draw a conclusion from that. If Congressman Davis was on board with the original plan, and he's on board even more so with this plan, I'm guessing they're going to have the votes to pass this. They got the Freedom Caucus signed on to it. We may see a vote on health care sometime next week. Stay tuned. 314-969-9797. A couple things I want to get to coming up. This Jesse Waters controversy where the libs are claiming that he's the latest one to offend women everywhere. I'll let you listen to what he said. And Jessica Rosenthal from Fox News Radio is out in California, probably being chased by some protesters right now. But she went out there to cover Ann Coulter, and now Coulter